Hello guys, and welcome to our channel. And today we are again trying to build a project. And see, the project that you are seeing on the screen is what we're going to build. So it's simply a URL shortener where a person can bring his links or any type of links, and he can create a short link for that. And not only that, we are also tracking the amount of clicks that are happening coming from our short link. So let's say if there is a link called as Amazon.in, right? So if there is a product and I am doing some affiliate marketing for that, so if I submit this link here, so this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a short URL link for that, and when somebody clicks on this link, right? So we are going to direct into its original link, right? So we are basically trying to build in-house Bitly or short URL. So if this something excites you, please watch the video. I have you know taken the journey from in scratch. So this is a purely unedited video. There is no scripting and all. So we'll walk you through, and we'll try and debug it in the video itself. So this is simply how a developer generally works with this project, right? So there will be trial and misses, there will be some errors. So I hope this video was helpful. So thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please give a subscribe or like to this video. So without wasting any time, let's start the video. Yeah. So today in this video, we're going to build a URL shortener. So this is inspired from this called as short URL. So basically, this is not a new project or something which has been not done previously, but I thought of making a video where we'll walk through the entire journey, where we'll start from the scratch and we'll build the entire project. So this is the project that we are trying to build. So short URL.at, right? So this is, you can see that basically, let's say if you have some URL, right? And if I copy that URL and paste it here, and if I say shorten URL, so this is going to create a short URL for me. And if I copy that and paste it into a new tab, right? So then this is going to redirect me to the original URL, right? So this is basically a replica of this, and it also has total clicks, right? So one click. So if I would have visited that website for like 100 times, the click would be 100. So this is the best way to share URLs where the URL is quite big, and you not want to scare anybody with the big URLs. So this could be a short URL, and also it's also a way for which so we can track how much traction that we are getting, and how much amount of, let's say, there is some marketing URL that you are trying. So if you are related to some affiliate marketing, or if you are a YouTuber and you have some links with Amazon affiliate, etc. So this is one thing that it makes it easy for the content creator so to understand how his affiliate marketing has been going on. So this is the project that we're going to do, and we're going to build it using a Django. So let's start this project. So I will be going slow, and I will try to cover each and every step, right? So each and every line that I'm writing, so I'll try and make sure to make you understand that why I'm writing and how this is going to work, right? So let's simply just create a website. So I think I have something called as so yeah. So we're going to use Django. So if you're new to Django, then this might not be a first video that you have to watch, right? So there are multiple videos where even in my channel I have shown how to create a Django project and all. So little basics of Django would do, right? So if you know a little bit of Django, if you know a little bit of Python, then this video is good for you. You can follow each and everything. So let's create a project. So for that, you need to install Django. I have already installed it. So I can say something like Django admin, and I'm going to say start project. So this will create a new project for me, and I have to pass URL for that. So the URL that I thought is something like FURL. So yesterday I was looking into the Google, trying to come up with a website. So when I search for a full, so it meaning is roll up or fold up neatly and securely, which exactly fits with what URL shortener does, right? So I've thought this is the best name for that. I could also use something like curl or full, but full look nice because it has F in it, right? So let's do the ls, and let's change into our FURL, right? So now simply open this into a code editor, and we'll start by coding the project. right? So before starting with the project, so there are few things that is, I don't say it is necessary, but it is good to follow, so that your Django project is structured. And even let's say you're coming back to this project like from 2 years from now and try to develop this project, right? So you understand what's happening, right? So for that, we need to structure the data project in a particular way such that it makes it easier for us to watch. So first thing I do is simply start up the project so that we know everything is working or not. So let's say Python manage.py run server. So what does this command do? So if you observe, right, so we have a file called as manage.py. This is simply a admin kind of thing, right? So this is the place where magic happens. So all the commands that you do, whether creating a user, running a project, making migrations, everything is done via manage.py. We simply pass some arguments to this and everything happens, right? So that's one thing. And this is our main module, that is FURL. So this is going to have settings.py. So this settings.py will define how our project works the way it is working, right? So it has everything like something like secret key and all, right? So how the templates are being mapped, or how the middleware is working, and what are the apps you have installed, everything is in the settings.py. And even the databases, so we are also going to use a database here. So I'm going to use the default SQL database, so nothing to change here. So this is I think some things you have to know. So let's go back and see if our project is running. So I will just simply put this into a new desktop. uh, let's open up a localhost. Yeah, so you can see that our project is running. So this is a default web page that Django provides you, right? So now we'll start by simply saying hello world, right? So let's go back to our urls.py. So urls.py is nothing but it's a file which is responsible for mapping all the URLs in our website, right? So by default we only have one URL, that is admin, so which is responsible for admin level stuff, right? So I will show you a small example, then we'll move on to create a app, right? So in Django there is something called as MVC, right? So model views and MVC, what the C stands for? Sorry, controls. Yeah, controller. So MVC is a pattern that we use. That is, we have models, we have views, and we have controllers. Controls are nothing but URLs, some REST API, something like that. Views are nothing but what are we showing to the user. That could be HTML file and all. Models are nothing but our databases and tables, right? So Django follows MVC architecture, and this is something that you have to understand. So I suggest you to like go through the documentation once. I will be explaining things, but no, for your personal understanding, I suggest you go into the documentation. So I'm going to import something called as views. So obviously we haven't defined any views, right? So let's create a view file here. I'm going to say views.py. So this file is responsible for providing the views for our controller, that is url.py. So let's simply create a sample URL. So let me check if everything is working or not. Yes. So let's say define sample view. So this is going to be a sample, and it's going to take a request as an argument, and it is going to return let's say HTTP response. So for that I need to import HTTP response. Okay. From So in Django there is something called as shortcuts, and if I import HTTP response, I can use that here to simply send a HTTP response to that. So I can say simply like h1 hello, right? So this view is responsible for sending hello, that is h1, right? So let's go back to our URL. So this has to be a string, right? Let's go back to our URL and let's serve that view through a controller, that is. So I'm saying empty path. So I'm defining whenever there is an empty path, I want the user to be shown this view. that is views.sample, right? So what I'm saying is whenever somebody goes to a root, right, so show them this view, right? So show them this view. So that is a simple thing that we're trying to do here. So if I reload, then yeah, so you can see that this is a h1 tag of hello, right? So I hope you understand how Django is working, right? So let's now move a step further and create an app. So what do I mean by an app? So app is nothing but it's like a project within a project, so it's a sub project. So why do we need that? So it is simply a maintaining hierarchy and making your code structured, right? So a Django project can have as many number of apps as it can, but there is no definition that no, this can be an app, this cannot be an app. So anything can be an app until and unless you know that what you are doing, right? So are going to create an app, and this app is responsible for creating these short URLs and storing them into the database and retrieving them. So I will talk about more of the later, but let's create an app. So for that, this has to be git bash. Delete this. So I will be using two command prompts. So in the first one, our project is being running, so run server is running. The second one will try and run some commands. So let's again, if you observe, I'm going to use manage.py. So this is, as I said, this is a central file for running all the commands, and I'm going to say start app. So start app is going to create an app for us. So what is the name of the app that we're going to call? So I will call it as URL shortener, right? So URL short, simply say URL short, right? So this app is responsible for shorting URL, right? So this we're going to call it as URL short. As you can see that a project is our app is created in the project, and you can see it has views, models, everything associated with that, and it also has some migrations, right? So first thing that you have to do when you create a project is go into settings and define that project. So it's called as URL short, right? URL short. So we have said to Django that okay, this is the app that I have, so take care of that. So Django will now take care of our app, right? So there is no worries here. Let me check if everything is going well. Yep. So now once we have our app, right, so there is something that we have to do is, so there you can see that there are some migrations that have to be performed. Let's go back here and let's do the migrations Python. Okay, so it is what do I mean by migrations is nothing but whenever we create a model or create an app, right? So there are some things that Django has to perform. So basically that is what migrations. It will look for all the changes in the files. It will stage them all. So that kind of stuff. Nothing fancy here. Okay, so now we have that. So I'm going to do something like this. So we'll go into our main app, right? So instead of showing views from here, I want to show views from a URL short. So for that, I'm going to include a shortcut called as include, right? So using the include, I can include URLs from any other app. So I'm going to say include, and I will pass URLs from URL short. So URL short dot URLs, right? So what it means is that okay, whenever somebody is in the root directory of our project in our website, so include all the URLs from the URL short. So whenever somebody hits this page, then automatically we are forwarding them to URL short app, and we are going to show them views from this place. So let's create a urls.py. So this is responsible for all the URLs in our short. Let's copy this for a while and paste it here. So now let's close this. So we don't need much of our original thing. So we are only going to use our app to do the things from now on. So this is our URLs in our app. So let's remove this. We don't need admin here, and so we can also remove this. Now from here we can show them the views. Let's create a sample view here. right? So we already have views.py. So I'm going to create a view here. So it's going to call it as home. So this is going to be our landing page, and here let's import HTTP response for now. So return HTTP response of let's say landing page of f URL, right? So if I run this, you should be seeing something like, I don't know, site can be reached. Let's run the server again. So what's the error that we're getting? So no module name URL short. Okay, we have make the spelling mistake. So URL short is going to be a capital letter. Let's run the server. Okay, so we haven't included this, right? So go to our views dot home. So now what's happening here is that whenever somebody comes to our URL, right? So whenever he's in the root, so we are going to say that no include URLs from URL short. So the work of this is over, and it comes to our URL short, and it will look for the URLs. What is the batching URL? So yeah, so we are at the root. So we are at the blank path, and it says, okay, if you are at this point, show him this home, right? So what do we have in our home? Home has a landing page of HTML. So if I which URL. So now if I reload, so I should be seeing landing page, right? So we are good, right? So we are good to go. And one thing is that we cannot send all our HTML file as a HTTP response, right? So we have to simply create an HTML file, and you have to pass a file from here. So for that, we're going to create a HTML file. So I'm going to create a new folder called as when you are at the home directory, right? So create a new thing called as a TEMPLA TS templates. Okay, so move. So template has to be in the outermost directory, so in the project directory, and here we are going to create all our HTML files. So let me say landing page.html, right? So let's define this. Right, so let's call it as FURL home, and let's say let's create a h1 tag, and you can say FURL URL shortener, right? So now if I save this, reload this, you can see there's nothing changed because we have created the file, but we haven't linked it to anything, right? So for the linking purposes, we have to go to our views, and instead of rendering this HTML tag, so we can use something called as render. Render is basically a Django shortcut to simply pass our HTML file. So I can say it takes multiple arguments. One is request, right? And the second is the template name. So I'm going to call it as landing page.html. And if I save this, then yeah. Now if I reload this, then it has to work, right? Theoretically yes, but practically it does not work because you have created something called as templates. You are passing your template, but how does Django know that this is where it has to look? Right, this is where again settings.py comes into the picture. As I've said, so when we are trying to do anything, so we have to make sure that it is aligning with our settings. So go into settings, and in the templates there is something called as directories. So here you have to define your directory for your templates. So spell it as it is, because it has to be spelled in exact way. So if you are giving it as a template, you have to give it as a templates as well. Now Django will know that, okay, there is this folder called as templates. Also look into that if you're trying to render some HTML files. So now if I reload, now this should work, right? So it is saying that URL shorten, right? So now our project setup is done, right? So now is a good time to understand and plan how we are going to create our URL shorteners, right? So this is what I was thinking of doing, right? So we are going to have an input tag. So we'll take the input tag, and in the background what we're going to do is we are going to create a random string, right? So it is a combinations of alphabets and everything, right? So we're going to use that to create a small 4 to 5 letters of short URL, right? And we're going to store them into our databases such that we can make a lookup whenever user is trying to come back to the original URL, right? So we're going to store them into our database, and this is how we are going to make the URL work. And we're also going to store the count of the links such that whenever a link has been visited, we update the count each time, right? So we're going to create this functionality and this functionality, right? So let's go back to our models. So this is where we are going to create a models. Models are nothing but database tables, right? So let's create it, the thing. So for that, we are going to say something like class, and let's say URL model, right? And it is going to pass models dot model. Now, so I think we have to give this, right? So, yeah. Now, so this is going to take arguments. Sorry, we are going to have to define what are the columns that we are going to define into our table, right? So in our URL model table, so we are going to have three things. One is what is our long URL, right? And what is our short URL, and what is the count, right? So these are the three things that I am trying to store into my database table. So let's do that. So for that, we're going to say models dot, there is something called as char field, right? So we are going to use that, and maximum length is good. Let's say 255. And there's also something called as short URL. So this is also going to be a character field at which we are going to store. And for the max length, I'm going to define it as 7, right? So we can create any short URL of length 7, and we are considering all the capital alphabets, small alphabets, and special characters. So 7 length of all these things. So the number of combinations that we are going to have is going to be some trillions, right? So it's safe to say that we are not going to exhaust short URLs easily. So again, let's create a count, and let's say model dot, let's see what is present. So I think there has to be something called as integer field, and let's give a default value. So default, it is going to be a value of 0, right? So, and let's also give something called as define underscore str. So this will define how we are giving the name for that. So we are going to say simply return long URL self dot long URL, right? So the name, sorry, let's give it as short URL itself. So whenever we are trying to print this model, so the name is going to be short URL, right? So this is what we're going to do, and let's check if they have any migrations that we have to do. Okay. migrate on URL short. Changes are not reflected in migration, so won't be applied. So I have to use make migration. Sorry, make migration. Yep. So when I say migration, so it has no identified our URL model, right? So, and it has migrated. So yep. So all the migrations are applied. So now, so there is one thing that I want to show you. So I want to show you how the admin panel looks, right? So for that, I'm going to say, I want to create a super user. So create super user. So super user is nothing but it's an admin. So admin empty admin. I'm going to create a super user and we'll log in with super user and see whatever the Django is providing for us. So if you go to /admin, right, then you could see this admin panel. So this is a hidden backdoor, something kind of thing where admins can look into the stuff that's happening into the website. If you log in here, so you can see all the things that are present. So you can see the users and all. Currently we are unable to see our URL short because there is nothing been created yet. So let's wait, and once we create something, right, so we can see here, right? So let's try and finish our website, right? So I'll go into my templates landing page, and let's simply create a let's work on our UI. So this is how the URL looks, right? So let's do the style, position, sorry, let's do float. Okay, let's keep it as it is. I'm not a big HTML CSS guy. Let's do one thing. So one thing that we have to do is we have to create another division where we are going to take inputs. So for that, I'm going to create a form, and for the action, let's just keep it as empty for now. So let's just understand what are the things that we are going to take in our form. So we are going to have an input, and it's going to be a text input, right? And let's give it a name. Name is going to be a long URL. So long URL is going to be entered, and we are going to have another input, that is submit button. Right. Let's see how it looks here. So this is going to be our URL, and we're going to do submit. And once somebody clicks on submit, I want them to be forwarded to the next page. So let me create a new thing. So I'm going to path, and I will call it as go. So go is where URL short happens, and I'm going to pass a views called as make short URL, right? So let's create this view here. So define make short URL, and let's pass a request here, and let's simply for now let's please say HTTP response request received, right, is going to be returned. Right. So let's simply submit this. Wait, So did we, okay, in the action, let's give the name of that URL. So let's say go. So, and also let's define the method is equal to post. So post method, and it is going to be going to the URL go, and whenever go is being hit, so we are going to show them the make short URL view, and in this view we are simply sending that request has been received, right? So let's give this URL here, submit this. Okay, so long URL is equal to this. So post request has been sent. I think there's something. Okay, so there is only path called as go. Let's save this. Why is this not happening? Current path did not match with any of this. Interesting. Let's try and restart our project to see if this works. Okay. Let's take this URL, put it here. Okay, so it is going, and we are seeing something like CSFR token missing. So whenever we are trying to do this, so we have to include something called CSFR token. So what exactly is CSFR token, right? CSRF token. So in Django, there are a few things that were kept in mind when building the Django, that is security, right? So CSFR token is Django's way of providing securities like against attacks like SQL injection attacks or scripting attacks, etc. There are many attacks which I may not be familiar with. So what I understand is from the documentation that CFSR token is used to provide security and prevent from attacks on our websites, right? So now if I reload this, then we're sending the request again. Okay. For let's go to go localhost. Yep, so now we can see that the request has been received, right? So let's go to a view and let's simply print. So yeah, whenever we are getting a post request, right, so we're going to get, so let's check that. So if request dot method is equal to post, so whenever a post request has been made, let's try and get the values from the post request. So let's simply say long URL is going to be request dot post of long URL, and let's simply print the long URL to see if everything is working as expected or not. So if I reload, then the submission is going to be again happening, and okay, I have to say double equals to, yep. So you can see So this is the URL that we have sent, right? So let's do this. Received is, if I say something like this and go back to our website, and if I give the URL of this website, right, if I send this website, so the request has been received, and you can see that we are getting that in this place. So the URL that we have got is short URL, right? So now we have access to that URL. So now this is the right place to simply upload that into our database, right? So we have created a model, right? So we have to register this model before we do anything. So we have to go to admin.py and admin.register dot admin.register of, I think this is it. Okay, let's look into so register model on admin Django. All right, so there is something called as admin.register. Yeah, admin.site.register of author. We're going to register what? So let's import our models. Should we import it? I don't think so. Control C. Your model is not defined. Let's do that. So from dot models import URL model, right? So we have imported the URL model and we have registered that. So now one thing is, if I go into the admin dashboard, then I should be seeing this URL model. So we have registered that into a site, and if I open that, then you can see structure of each thing. So if it just simply adds something, so it is going to take long URL and short URL. So long URL is going to be this. Let's say the short URL that we are picking is yvhg $, right? So this is going to be a short URL which is of 6 length. So if I save, then you can see it is getting the name of short URL, because we have defined that in our model that for the string return cell short URL, right? And the count is going to be 1, right? So let's also again do the changes where when we each time make a request, we'll also update the count. But for now, let's go back to our views. So this is our long URL is equal to request.post of long URL. Now we have to simply save that into a database. So for that, I can simply say, since we're in the same app, so from dot models import URL model. So we have URL model. So I can simply say object is equal to URL model dot create objects dot create. Yep. So we can create an object. So what are the arguments that we have to pass in them? Simply we have to pass long URL, and then we have to pass short URL. Right? We don't need to pass a count. So we don't have any short URL, right? So let's simply say short URL. Right, so is equal to, let's use something for now. And for creating short URL, so we can simply create a random project. So I think I have something in my GitHub. Let's open that. I think I have to open if I go into my GitHub, right, I have one repository that which I have created later when I was in my second year or something. So I am not sure what I called it. I gave something like Trippion. Yeah, so this is that. So I remember I created a project called as a password generator. Yeah, I think we can use this code to create a random key, right? So I will also leave the link to this GitHub repository, right? So let me show what the code actually is. So if I save this here, so you can see that this is basically a randomization problem. So I have this long URL called as S, and we are having small a to z and capital A to z, and numbers and special characters, everything, right? I think we can even add some special characters, ampersand. Okay, we can also do this. We can also do this. Yep. So these are some special characters that we can add. I think we can also add this and this, sorry, add this. Yeah. So these are some special characters that we can take consideration, and we have. So I have taken for pass length, right? So I cannot do it directly, and very simply importing random, and you're passing the length here. So let's do 6 for our case, and let's import random. Import random. So random is going to pick some 6 characters from this long character, and we are going to join them to create our p. So p is nothing but our short URL here, right? So let's remove this, and this is going to be a short URL, and using that we are going to create an object, right? So let's say object created. Let's also pass long URL, Control C. Long URL is equal to long URL, short URL is equal to short URL, right? So this is how we are going to create an object. Let's see if it is working or not. Let's go to a root. So this is going to be a URL. Let's create it for this. When I upload this here, and if I submit, it is saying request has been received, and the object has been created as well, right? Okay, let's also print that object that we are having. Object. Let's do one thing. Simply we'll go into our admin localhost 8000 /admin. Go to your role model. Yeah, I think we have here. Yeah, so this is going to be our URL, and this has been created. So our objects have been created, right? So instead of sending like no HTTP response, let's say that no, let's do something. Your short URL for this is this, and let's say in dot format. So for your short URL, for you have to pass our long URL, and the second place we have to pass our short URL. Short URL. Right. So let's go back. Let's create another. So let's create something for google.com, and it is saying that your short URL for google.com is this, right? So the functionality is good, so it is working. And instead of saying it as this, it's good if we say if we add our website name, right? So currently we are in localhost, right? Okay, so let's add our localhost itself. Localhost plus short URL, right? Now if I again send a request, let's copy this, let's send this. So for this URL, right, so the short URL that was generated is this, right? So now if I open this into a new page, currently we are saying page not found, but we have to create a page where it is being redirected to this original previous page, right? I think we are getting there where functionality is working. Let's go back and let's also create redirect urls, and it's going to take a request, and it is also going to take a short url, right? And once we have that short url, so we are going to redirect them to that url. So redirect them to our short url, sorry, redirect them to our long url. So once we have a short url, we are going to redirect them to long url. So for basic purposes, let's give it as a localhost, right? Let's try what happens. Let's try and see what happens. For that, we need to create an url, right? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say a path, and whenever somebody goes to a particular this thing, so there's a string, and we're going to pass short url. So whenever somebody goes to something like this, right, in that case we're going to send them to our views dot redirect url, right? So since we are using this schema, so we can simply catch that here. So redirect url, we have something like short url. I can simply print the short url also, because yeah. So now when somebody goes to some localhost slash some random number, so this number is going to be passed into this view as a short url, and we can decrypt that here from the database. We'll do that shortly, but for now we are simply redirecting them to our localhost 8000. So I'm also printing this to a console to see whether it is working or not, right? So let's open this short url in a new page, and did not return HTTP, it has returned none. Okay. Let's see what did we get here. Okay, so we were able to get this. We were able to get the short URL, but we couldn't redirect them to long URL. Let's do one thing. Let's create. Let's fetch our short long URL from this. So for that we can do something like object is equal to, and let's fetch, so URL model dot objects dot get. So we're trying to get an object where short URL is going to be our short URL, right? So now let's say long URL is equal to object dot long URL. Wait, one thing that we have to do is once we have our object, so we have to check if object is not null, right? If object is not null, we are going to perform something else, return HTTP response, sorry, return HTTP 404 page not found. But if we found an object, print that object found. So we found an object here, and let's simply print object dot long URL, right? Let's do that. Long URL is not defined. Let's go back. Let's use this website. Let's use this website. Let's go to this website. So we have URL here. So let's, if I go to this website, then what is going to happen? So url.views.redirector returned response, it returned none instead. Okay, but what did we get in the console? Yep, so we got this, right? So we got our URL. We got our URL, right? So this is our URL. This is our object. See, we have found our object. This is going to be a short URL. So it has also found our long URLs, that is sample. And our problem is that we are doing this something like that. Okay, so let's search redirect to a URL in Django. Okay, we have to do return redirect. So I have only given that, right? So if object is found, then we're going to say return redirect URL of object dot long URL. Let's go back, and if I reload this, pressing one positional argument short URL. So now I think this should work. Yeah, so now we have been moved to the sample.page, right? So let me show what happened here. So whenever somebody goes to the URL short URL path, right? So what I'm doing is I'm calling my database and trying to get that object in the database. So if there is an object with our short URL, that is, if the object is present, then we found our object and we are retrieving the long URL for that object, and we are simply redirecting him into this long URL. In fact, we also have to do one thing like object dot count plus equals to 1, right? So every time we are here, so let's also update the count of that and simply save that object dot save, right? So now object will be saved and we are redirecting to that page. Else we are simply saying HTTP 404. I think it has to be a 404 website. Let's check the 404 as well. So let's go to some wrong URL. So I'm only copying this part, so this is going to be a wrong URL. So you have to get page. Okay, so we're getting error here. What is that error? Short URL. Okay. Whenever somebody sends to a wrong page, if object subject not I think we are only going to check whenever there is not equal to none, right? URL matching query does not exist. So where the problem is, line 22. Object get short URL is equal to URL. Okay, let's simply say try. Try. Sorry, what am I doing? Let's go back. Oh, what the hell? Okay. Check your URL. Right, I think this should work. Let's go here. Matching query does not exist. Get an object in okay. Let's print our object. Let's print our object by sending wrong cases. Let's say re slash re. What do we get here? Let's search for this error. Matching query not found. Okay, somebody got the same. Okay. We tried it previously, right? So we have tried it. Try. Control X. Control V. So we're trying to get an object, except object dot does not exist. In that case, let's say object is equal to none, and okay. So if object is not none, so we're going to say that okay, we found the URL. Else we're going to say check your URL. Nice. I think now it should work. Look, object reference before assignment. URL model dot exist. Yeah. Now we got it. Yes. So we're trying and try catching our error. So once we got the error, so we have here and we are simply making the count. right? So yep, so now we have all the functionality, so I can simply, if I reload this, I think the count has to increase. Let's copy this, and let's go to localhost, paste this, right? So now if I reload this, the count has to increase, right? So if I do this a couple of times, yep, so now the count has to be increased to 2, right? So this is how yeah, now we already have all the functionality that we require, right? So we are creating a URL, and we are making this URL. And one thing that we have to change is see, right now we haven't deployed a project, right? So we are simply using localhost. But once, let's say, we buy a domain called as furl dot something, in that case, you have to replace that with that, and yeah, then we're good to go, right? So let's go back to our project to see if everything is working or not. So let's go to localhost. So I'm going to open my LinkedIn page. Yeah, okay. So LinkedIn, control A, control C. So if I place my LinkedIn page, I want to create a short URL for my LinkedIn. So I'm going to say submit, and so this is going to be my short URL, right? So if I simply pass this here, right, so it's going to take me to my LinkedIn URL, and I can see that in my admin as well, slash admin. So in the admin, we will be having statistics for each and every URL that we created, right? So this is my LinkedIn URL, and I have already had one click here, right? So that's how the project works. And let's do some cleaning here. So let's try and make this URL look good. So instead of simply passing HTTP response here, let's render HTML, right? That looks good. Okay, so for that, let's say new file, URL created .html. Let's keep the camel case going, right? So furl, your short URL, right? So one thing that we can do here is let's go back to our views, and here, instead of sending this, let's comment this out, and let's say return render, and pass the request here. And here I'm going to pass my HTML file. I'm going to say URL created .html, right? And let's pass the context dictionary here. So there is something called as context. So this is a dictionary where we can pass values into the file, right? So for that, I'm going to say short URL. Short URL is going to be my short URL, right? And comma long URL is going to be my long URL. So these are the two values that I'm passing into my HTML file, and I can simply render them in my HTML. So here I can say let's say with h2 tag, let's say that your short URL has been created, right? And let's also say h3 tag, your long URL is, and let's simply say a for link, right? So in the reference, we can simply pass our long URL. So long URL, long URL. Let's copy this page, sorry, at this line. So here your short URL is short, short URL, short URL. Right, let's see if this is working or not. Yeah, okay, so your short URL, your long URL is okay. So we have passed our context dictionary, right? Okay, so I think I have to say context of, right? I can simply, if I remove this, then I think this should work, right? Short URL. Yeah, this is my short URL, and why is it not being loaded here? Okay, I did a mistake. Control X, Control V, Control X, and Control V. Right, right. Right. Now if I reload this, yeah. So this is going to be my long URL, so it is my short URL. Right. So if I simply click this, so it is going to take me to my you can see that it has taken me through that. Yep. Yep. So this is our URL shortener that we have created. So yep, I hope this video was helpful, right? So if you have any doubts, put it in the comment section, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.